Hello, and welcome to the podcast. First, some quick introductions.
Hi, I'm Adrian. I'm a composer and sound designer for video games and VR. I worked on Polybridge, Snow Fortress, and I'm currently working on Wotan and some other projects as well.
Hey, I'm Daniel. I'm an indie game developer, and I made an indie game called Pony Island in 2016. And now I'm working on a game called The Hex.
Hi, I'm Grapple Bug. I'm an animator and an independent game developer. I'm currently working on a puzzle platform game called Wotan. So the idea behind our show is that all three of us are independent game developers, all based in Vancouver, kind of like living and working, day to day on our stuff. And we all kind of share that same experience where, because we're making games, we kind of don't really play games, which I don't think is that uncommon among developers. Like, you sort of feel like you spend a lot of your working life on games, so you get this sort of reluctance to maybe play too many of them in your downtime, because maybe you'd rather be doing something that doesn't make you think about video games constantly for your whole life.
Yeah.
But, having said that, the danger there is sometimes you do lose like that authentic excitement for playing a video game, which I know is something that happens to me from time to time. Like, sometimes I just don't know if I can get the enthusiasm back to play something. But there will always be those games from your own personal history that you always get excited about no matter what. And those will be the games that you're always pushing on to other people and recommending to them, like, you got to play this and you got to try that. And this one's awesome. And your friends, they'll always be like, yeah, that sounds good. And then they'll never do anything about it, especially if they're busy people. They'll just sort of, do their own thing. And if they do have a little bit of downtime, they'll just play Overwatch or whatever.
They're not going to go to they're not going to go to the effort to dig out their Game Boy or
and
download an emulator.
Right. That's the download. What are you talking about? Do you understand what this guy's saying?
No. I know for me lately, I've had a lot of deadlines. So typically the games that I actually like playing are ones where I even know it is a shorter experience. Mm-hmm. It is maybe only 2 hours, 4 hours to play, maybe even less.
Yeah. Or you end up playing something like a fighting game or a first-person shooter, or you just end up like replaying the missions in Metal Gear Solid 5 because you like shooting people in the knees in slow motion. So we'll try to go a little bit beyond that and try to get back into some of like the core experiences of actually putting time into a game and actually appreciating it in like a longer format. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it should be fun. It should be good. I'm excited to know what you guys are going to suggest later on down the line.
So how this is going to work, it's going to be like kind of like a book club?
Yeah, kind of like a book club. Mm. Kind of like a book club, but definitely not like a book report. Like, you don't have to come back with your thoughts on every facet of the game. Like, no need to really review it or anything. But if there's something that appeals to you and you want to talk about it in depth afterwards, like whatever you take out of the game, it would be great to know from your perspective, whatever that is. So what I wanted to get you guys to try was the Legend of Zelda Oracle of Seasons on the Game Boy Color. So have either of you played this before?
I haven't, no.
I briefly played it as a kid, but I didn't get very far.
Did you own it?
Well, my uncle owned it.
Right.
And I went to his house and I played it on his Game Boy a little bit, and I didn't get very far. And at the time I had played Ocarina of Time, and I loved it. And when I tried that one, I was like, oh, this is not as exciting in 3D. So.
Oh, okay, well.
But that was just me as a kid.
Yeah, and you've grown a lot, and you've matured, and you've grown out of your subpar opinions since then. But, okay, Oracle of Seasons. I don't know where I got this game cartridge from, because I thought I had Oracle of Ages, and I was really excited to tell you guys we're playing Oracle of Ages, because that's the one that I actually know really well. Mm-hmm. So they're like sort of sister games to each other. They had some compatibility and like passwords that they shared. But I thought I had Oracle of Ages because that's the one I played, but I don't, and I have Oracle of Seasons. And I think I probably stole this from a childhood friend, or maybe we did like a trade where I gave him Ages and he gave me Seasons. But they're really similar games, and I'm kind of excited anyway because it's like something that I know really well, but kind of not because it was ages instead. So basically, you are probably aware of it to some extent. The basic idea is, it's a 2D Zelda game, and what sets it apart is you have some control over the seasons, which is really neat.
Oh, yeah.
Sort of like a power that you get is to cycle between different seasons, and that allows you to do things like overcome challenges and solve puzzles and interact with the world in really interesting ways.
So do you go between seasons, and if you do something in one season, it affects sort of another alternate world of the other season? Is that
not really? That's actually a lot more like Oracle of Ages, which is kind of an interesting distinction to make. Oracle of Ages, as far as I remember, it was sort of like you go into the past, you change things, and you come back to the present, and what you've done had an effect over the timeline. So, things like people's destinies change because of the stuff you do in the past, or you can change parts of the landscape because, maybe something gets built or doesn't get built or whatever. But in seasons, it's more sort of like, it's less about like a lasting impression and more about like, oh, there's a big lake here and you don't know how to swim yet. So you change the season to winter and the whole lake is frozen over with ice. Yeah. You walk over and you can get into this cave and, blah, de blah. So that's kind of like the gimmick in seasons, but I think it's a really nice gimmick. Like you might see like, oh, there's some plants that will probably grow in springtime or something that'll let me climb this wall that I want to go up. So it's kind of a more, I wouldn't say like temporary mechanic, but it has less of the cause and effect that might have been seen in something like Oracle of Ages.
Were those games released at the same time?
Yeah, I think they were both released in 2001.
And how similar are they? Like, it sounds like those two mechanics would be like pretty different, like they'd be entirely different endeavors, but somehow it seems like they probably shared a lot of assets and stuff. The
games definitely share loads of assets with each other. And actually, as far as I know, there was also a third game that was supposed to be like a set of 3 released all at once. But I think, something was going wrong, and it was sort of like a bit of a bloated production and maybe like too much to ask to get these 3 games out. So they just focused on 2 instead. So I think,
because like Pokemon is so cheap in how it has the different versions. Like all they do is just have different sets of Pokemon that you can catch. But this is like, it seems like a lot of effort to have 2 games that are very similar, right?
Yeah. This is like,
and not many people are going to buy both. It just seems like an interesting decision.
Well, the two games are really similar in terms of the assets and the sounds and everything that they share with each other. But I mean, for one thing, you're playing in 2 different locations. I think it's 2 different worlds even. And everything's different. Like the dungeons are different and stuff like that. So, but it was actually, it's a good point because it was during that time where, Pokemon is the shit and people are looking at ways to like, how can we pair up our games with each other?
Yeah.
Like what can we do to, and
Pokemon just seemed like a cheap way to get like people who are mega fans to buy the game twice, kind of, and it was easy for them to do that.
The thing with Pokemon is that, I know that it was cheap, but I knew it at the time, but I was still like totally in love with the idea that you needed the other thing.
Yeah, it is cool that it encouraged people, if you only do have one of them, it's cool that it encourages you to find someone who has the other one.
Well, when I was like 10, I moved into a new house and I met, the neighbor kids, like on like the first day I was there. And it was back at that time when everyone had Pokemon and everyone kind of had it in their pocket even. So I made fast friends with this kid, and then he and I were just like, I had the blue version and he had red version. And then we just thought, do you want to start a new game together at the same time, play Pokemon and just finish it, like get everything. Yeah. And we did that together. And it took us about 25 hours to do everything, but we did it like crazy people. And I know, so on the one hand, it's sort of like blue version and red version. And maybe it is a little cheap. Like
what I'm trying to say is this seems like it's not very cheap. Like it was very hard for them to pull this off, but like it seems not worth it if you're going to make 2 entirely different games, and maybe you shouldn't release them at the same time and like build them as being kind of the same but different.
Yeah, and I mean I guess there is a danger in that people are gonna, unlike Pokemon, I guess with something like this, maybe you will just choose one or the other.
Yeah, if I was a kid, I wouldn't have gotten both of those games. Like,
well, I mean, I already said, like, I thought I had Oracle of Ages, so I looked in, you know, I looked in my closet through all my old stuff, and I've got Oracle of Seasons, and like I said, I was sort of like, okay, I think I can still talk about this. I just don't really know anything about it. So maybe you're right. Maybe it's like you didn't really need both. So unless maybe you're like a super fan, you're just going to buy one and be happy with that too. I want to give a little bit of a background into the game, but I don't want to get too in depth like I'm writing an essay or whatever, because I mean, if you're interested in some of the specifics, you can just look it up yourselves. But I think you should give credit where credit's due for the people who worked really hard on these games. Obviously, it's a Nintendo property, The Legend of Zelda. So it was published by Nintendo, but what's interesting to me actually is that it was actually developed by Capcom, who I really love Capcom, especially in this time period, 2001 and before. That sort of Capcom to me is kind of like the best, because it's like, it's still the time where, like, I don't know, a lot of like really nice pixel art games are coming out, and a lot of really nice 2D games. And I think Capcom was at the top of their game in terms of producing 2D stuff. And they had a pretty healthy history with RPGs and adventure games and stuff like that as well. So yeah, Capcom, but actually the company that really did the bulk of the work was called Flagship, and Flagship were a subsidiary of Capcom. Flagship did a bunch of cool stuff, and they're not really around anymore, but they got folded into Capcom about a decade ago. But they made some good stuff while they were working.
Did they do anything after
this game?
Yeah,
they did a bunch of other games.
Any
I think
big ones?
They were involved in like developing ideas for existing franchises and developing installments. So one thing they did was they made I thought this was really cool. They made 2 pitches for Resident Evil 4 that were not accepted in the end. So they had a couple of draft versions of Resident Evil 4. And I think you can actually find footage of that online where it looks really cool, where they're, Resident Evil 4, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. Like, that could be its own episode on its own. But Resident Evil 4 was like a really great sort of fast-paced action game. And the first couple drafts that Flagship did, I think, were a lot more along like horror or like haunted house vibe. So really kind of different way of looking at it. It was directed by Hidemaru Fujibayashi, who I actually hadn't really heard of before, but it turns out he's done a bunch of cool stuff. And he's actually, from this point onwards, it's sort of interesting historically, because he goes from this game to basically working on a bunch of the Zelda games in the future as a director. So he was involved as a director for games like the Minish Cap, for example, on Game Boy Advance, but then also moved on to eventually have a directing role in Skyward Sword. And then there was this little release that kind of like slipped by recently that not a lot of people have heard about, and you might have missed it, but it was called Breath of the Wild.
I thought you were gonna say like that crossbow game. Like,
oh yeah,
Link's crossbow.
Link's crossbow training.
Yeah.
No, it was Breath of the Wild. I'm just, Breath of the Wild is amazing, obviously. Yeah. But I mean, everyone's already said that. But I thought it was great because, like, honestly, I'm not really a big Zelda fan. There are a few titles that I really kind of like adore. Like, I love Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons, and I love A Link
to the Past. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my favorite.
Yeah, A Link to the Past is good. And maybe my favorite of all of them, though, is Link's Awakening, the other Game Boy title. There's just something about how tight these experiences are when you get them in this format that really appeals to me. Like, I feel sort of like, especially with these games, because they're Game Boy Color games from 2001, I feel like they really know exactly what they're doing with the system. They've had years and years with the Game Boy format in general. They've had like several years with the Game Boy Color specifically, and now they're just doing like very, very, very good work. And it's also right on the cusp of the release of the Game Boy Advance. So in some ways, it's like one of the last one of the last big pushes they make for the Game Boy Color before the Game Boy
Right.
Advance is out. Other than that, though, I was going to say Breath of the Wild is really awesome, and I love it. And it's sort of...
Do you have a Switch, or you play someone else's?
I have a Switch, by which I mean there is a Switch in my house. I didn't buy it, and I didn't really go to get one because there's like a lot of hysteria for getting one.
Not anymore though. Right?
Not anymore. But at the time, I was like, "This looks neat," but it's like a rat race just to get your hands on one of these things. So I thought I'd just hold off, but then there was actually a chance to get one later, and ended up getting one. So which is great, and Breath of the Wild's awesome. But yeah, everyone already knows that. And I'm here to tell you that Oracle of Seasons is awesome, and hopefully you're going to enjoy it.
Yeah, I'd like to dig into that because I actually haven't played much Game Boy Color. So, yeah. Did
you own one?
I owned one, but a lot later than it came out. Because my friend was just like, "Hey, you want this for $15?" I was like, "Well, shit, yeah." I was still playing more of the newer systems at the time and never really got around to it. So
I hope it'll be fun for you to do this kind of thing. I just thought it would be fun where we would just sort of have to force each other to play specific things and go through these specific like things that we would think are like personally important for whatever reason. What about you, Dan? Did you have a Game Boy Color?
Oh yeah, that was a big experience for me when I first got one. I got Pokemon Blue, and like I was very obsessed with it.
Yeah.
My parents like limited the amount of time I played it, but like that was all I thought about for a long period of my childhood.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah.
Nintendo, they really squeezed as much as they could out of the Game Boy format. Like first with the Game Boy, then with the Game Boy Pocket. Then after that, in Japan, they had the Game Boy Light, which we never got, which is too bad because I think it was pretty cool. Basically like a Game Boy where the screen is actually illuminated, so it's much, much easier to see. Then, Game Boy Color after that. But this whole thing has like a lifespan that's like well over a decade. And they just keep getting more and more and more out of this really, like simple compared to what some of the competitors were coming up with, relatively simple hardware. And like that was actually, I think, what really allowed them to succeed and like to thrive was that they were not really that focused on competing against something that was boasting like, full color with a light and this and that, because they could just focus on essentially making good games that would cost less. And particularly that's why that's what part of why Pokemon was so successful was how inexpensive it was at the time. And I think too, I had also heard by the time Pokemon came out in Japan, it was like a sleeper hit for the system. Like it wasn't intended to be as big as it was. And it kind of gave the entire Game Boy a huge second wind in sales. And so that had this massive effect where the system stayed alive and more games came out for it. And I think at the time they were considering just, putting the whole thing to bed and coming out with a successor for it.
Right.
But I think Pokemon changed their plans there.
I'm going to dig out my old Game Boy.
Yeah.
Because there's no other way to play a game like Legend of Zelda than the original system.
Yep.
Oh, that reminds me. Ages and Oracle of Seasons are available on the original Game Boy Color, but they're also downloadable titles for the Nintendo 3DS as well. So, do the right thing.
I might actually do that. Because I do have a 3DS and it might be more comfortable to play it on that than to play it on some sort of thing that would enable me to play it on my PC.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Hey, it would be nice to not be sitting at a desk and computer to play it too, right?
Like nice
well, that's part. I don't. Yeah, that's the thing, right? I work at my computer all the time, and so it's hard to sit down and play something there. So, yeah.
Do you think do you think it costs on the 3DS? It was more than $5. I think that's asking a little much.
I don't know. Probably not too much. I don't own a 3DS because I went with God's chosen system, the PlayStation Vita. So I couldn't really tell you.
I'll report back on that.
Okay.
No, it's not a report.
Oh, yeah, no, it's not a report. Well, that's it. I'll see you guys in a week. Have fun with it, and let me know what you think. Okay, so we played Oracle of Seasons, And now we're here to talk about it again. So what did you guys think?
So I think one thing that I'm going to be going back to a lot as I talk about it is like, how does it hold up by today's standards, and how might it have appeared back then?
Oh yeah.
So if I put myself in the mindset of when that game came out, which you want to remind me of exactly what year it was, like
2001.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Then if I put myself back to that time, it's pretty impressive. But if I look at it from 2017, there's a lot to be desired, I'd say.
Yeah.
In terms of, I think I'm not even going to like go after it visually, because obviously that was like a hard limit of the time, but more in a design sense. And I have some examples of parts where I was frustrated and parts that were just kind of absurd and maybe just bad design by today's standards.
Okay. Shoot. What do you think?
And like things that were bad design.
Yeah.
I just completed the second temple, and I fought the boss there. The floating face.
Yeah. Is that Snake's Remains?
Yeah, the temple was called Snake's Remains.
Yeah.
The temple is called Snake's Remains. There's a few snakes crawling around, but otherwise it's not really a consistent theme.
Okay.
Visually, it looks the same as the first dungeon, which
yeah.
There's only so many sprites they can fit in that thing. So
we can talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I have played this game before, and I have played Oracle of Ages as well, and that's one thing that, as much as I like the games, I never really loved the dungeons. Not because there are interesting aspects of the dungeons, and there are some pretty interesting puzzles and challenges and stuff, but visually the dungeons kind of look sort of, I guess they remind me of like chessboards or like something assembled from colored blocks or something like that, which is not really nearly as exciting to explore as like a changing wilderness that cycles through different seasons.
Yeah.
So yeah, visually the second dungeon looks like the first, and a bunch of the others.
And I kind of expect that's what the rest are going to be like.
Yeah,
for the most part.
Yeah, a lot of them.
And so I guess, like if I'm saying what I'm criticizing right now, to go back to that dungeon, I was stuck at one point because the visual language seemed unclear. I got the power bracelet and I tried pulling at these blue barrier things. I couldn't really tell what they were. They were just blue walls, they looked like to me. And everything else with the power bracelet, I had to pull back so I could bring it over my head and throw it down. And then at this point I got stuck because I tried pushing against them. I guess I didn't push against them long enough, but mostly I tried pulling at them, which had no effect. And I knew I had to do something with the power bracelet because that's the Zelda formula. You find your item and then that helps you complete the dungeon.
Yes.
But at that point, I wasn't sure at what point in perfecting the Zelda formula they were at this time. And I wondered maybe if I actually had to leave the dungeon and use the power bracelet somewhere else. And at that point, I was a little overwhelmed by thinking of going outside again and finding some other place to use the power bracelet. So I put it down, and then I talked to Graham at some point over the week, and then he said, oh yeah, those blue barriers, you actually have to push them with the power bracelet, which seems obvious.
Yeah. But I know where you're coming from, because on the one hand, it's like you get the bracelet, and the bracelet is mostly used for pulling things and lifting them over your head.
Yeah.
So you're typically pulling against stuff, and then you get to these barriers, and the barriers don't really look. They don't look very much like the other things you interact with using the power bracelet. So usually you're picking up pots or boulders or whatever and lifting them over your head.
Yeah.
And what you, like with the barriers, it's like you got to hold
the button, push against them
into it, and then
for
you
a little bit more than a second, kind of.
Yeah.
And once you told me that, I went back and I got to the end of the dungeon, and then I guess I'll wrap up what I'm saying about this dungeon. And then I got to this boss, this goofy floating face, who has 3 phases. He drops fire, he drops spiders for you to kill, and he opens up holes in the floor, which was cool at first. and he just repeats these phases over and over. And I played that battle for a while thinking I just had to survive because I couldn't slash his face. And I thought, well, this is the kind of boss where you wait him out and then eventually he has a weak spot, or eventually you just win if you wait long enough. And it took a long time, and I died, and I reset, and I was waiting a long time going through these phases. And then finally, I started to think, okay, I'm doing something wrong. There's got to be a way to interact with this boss. Power Bracelet is the item I got, and in most Zelda games, you have to use the item to defeat the boss. Yep. Well, I was wrong, but I first tried to pick up the spiders for the Power Bracelet. Yeah. It didn't work. It's like, I died one time butting my face against these stupid spiders. And then I got the clue only because I killed enough spiders to notice that their drop rate of the bomb was higher than other items. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? So turns out the ghost face in the Temple of Snakes, where you get the Power Bracelet, can only be killed with bombs.
And you get the bombs the first time.
And that's good design.
One, where you don't even need that to fight the boss.
And the bombs are a limited item. You could walk in that room with 0 bombs and have to kill a bunch of spiders even to get enough bombs to kill the boss.
Well, it's very true to life in that sense.
I don't think that's what Zelda is going for.
The only way to kill them or to kill floating faces.
Yeah.
You have to use bombs against them.
That's and also, like...
I mean, that's how I do it.
It's also, like...
In my day-to-day life.
It's, to be fair to it, just like in real life, maybe don't pick up spiders. They'll get... But,
So I just think that I'm not going to... Because obviously this game was really impressive for its time, and especially on the Game Boy Color. But if that came out today as an indie game, as I think if this game were to come out today, it would be an indie game.
Fair enough.
I think people would call that bad design. And if someone took that game, like someone we knew took that game to us and they told us to play test it, I think I would tell them that it's kind of silly to
Is there a 2D Zelda that you can think of that kind of you're comparing to that fixes those problems?
I haven't played that many 2D Zeldas. I played the Minish Cap, and I don't remember it enough, but I think by that point they had come closer to refining that formula.
Here's the thing, though.
I played the 3D ones.
Here's the thing with Zelda, which is why typically I would say, like, I'm not really a fan of Zelda in general, is that, like, I get really sick of the formula that shows up in a lot of the games, especially like in a lot of the 3D games, where it's like you go to a place, you're in this dungeon or temple or whatever. You go through this process, you get an item. You know immediately that item is something that you're going to practice using in order to defeat a mini boss. You get through the rest of the dungeon or the temple or whatever it is. Use that item a few more times, get to the boss, with certainty that, like, this is the item you have to use to defeat the boss. And that's all right. Like, that's fine. It's not like I really dislike that. I just dislike seeing that again and again and again for like 8 dungeons in a game where it's always the same. And especially some of the later games have these problems where it's sort of like, the items are like fun to use and they're cool and they seem pretty neat, but they only really have like that one moment to flourish inside of that dungeon.
Yeah.
And then when you're out in the world, in the rest of the world or in later dungeons, sometimes it's like, well, this item I've got is like not really useful anymore, which is actually...
The thing is, it's almost asking too much of them that if they have 8 dungeons or more, each with their own unique item, that they could somehow keep all of them in play. That'd be hard.
It would be, but like, I mean, they have done it recently, in my opinion, with like Breath of the Wild, how like pretty much everything that you can obtain in Breath of the Wild can be used in so many different ways, and it's like really, it's applicable to so many different situations. And I mean, that must be like a gargantuan task to design that and to make it work. But I mean, I know what you're saying, though. I think with this game, how you were saying, like, it's frustrating.
It's obtuse.
It's obtuse.
But that's what I expect of older games. Like,
sure.
In general.
Yeah.
Like, so
one thing that I think is like, is my feeling on the game is like, I do love the game. I love the atmosphere of it and I love it aesthetically. I love the graphics and I love the sound and the characters and like this sense of fun that's there. and the sense of exploration is nice too. But like, I'm not really there for, I guess, the gameplay or the design. I don't find it that compelling. And I think, like, especially playing this again, I remember that old feeling where it's like you've missed something somewhere. So like maybe you missed talking to somebody, or maybe you missed finding something hidden that you might need to progress. And then it's like, okay, I'm going to walk back to, the village, and then I'm going to talk to people in the village. Maybe I missed this person or that person. And then, so when you're out in the wilderness and it's like time to go back to the village and you're walking back, it's sort of just like a slog. And it's, and
I think the difference between when I played those games originally that had the possibility of that happening, that felt like slogs, is that I just had way more determination as a kid to complete the game, more time to do it, and more tolerance for that kind of stuff. And today I just don't have as much tolerance for a game, just like wasting my time.
I will tolerate it I'll definitely tolerate it if I think the experience is like charming enough that it's keeping me there.
Right.
And like for me personally, like this is charming enough, because it is a slog to like walk from here to there when you're like, oh, I missed something, so I gotta walk back. But for me, the way that I am looking at it, like actually quite literally looking at it, is just like, I fucking love this art, and I love the colors, and I love how sometimes you walk into a new area and the screen fades to white and fades back, and then it's no longer summer, it's skipped over to winter, and just like I love seeing all of that. Like it's great. And then, I mean, on the note of like always feeling like you're in a slog, at least one thing that they did was they have like the witch girl Maple, who like sometimes rides in, and then like she's there because the music changes and you see like her shadow kind of zooming by, and that for me sometimes didn't really make it worth it, like that sort of like persistent nonstop, just like the how arduous it can be sometimes just to walk from point A to B, but it spiced it up a lot. And I liked one-upping her in those challenges, and then she'd get upset, and then you might get a couple extra items out of the deal or something. So that was good. So at least maybe they were thinking of that. Yeah. In a way.
Yeah. I thought it was charming. I think I was kind of on board with it until I got to the dungeons. Like the first bit of like getting the sword, like being defenseless, they really played that up.
That's great though.
Getting the sword felt really good.
Yeah.
And I liked some of the charms. I really liked how the Maku trees, is that how you say it, had a big snot bubble. And you pop it. Like, I loved that.
Yeah. I liked it too. Like, and every time you needed to talk to him face to face, you have to pop the bubble. Yeah. And so on the one hand,
that'd be gross in real life.
Yeah. It'd be like inflated tree sap or something, like it is viscous kind of. But I did like that too, because I mean, effectively, it's the same thing. When you want to talk to an NPC, you might hit the A button.
I quickly learned to bind the talk to NPC button to the sword, so I wasn't dropping bombs in front of people. That was a minor frustration.
Yeah.
So if at worst I just swing my sword instead of wasting my stuff.
There was a moment in the Gnarled Root dungeon where I first got those flame seeds where you can light the torches. Yeah. And there was a chest in the next room that I didn't want to, it wouldn't open because with hitting it or whatever, it opens with the normal opening the chest, which is the same button as using the seeds. And I didn't want to use the seeds. Yeah. So it was kind of like, I wanted to just unequip it first and use it just in case I didn't waste it.
It's not great. Yeah.
Maybe that's a limitation of the controller just has A and B. So I guess,
Yeah, it does.
If we were remaking the game today, you could have some sort of visual indicator that you're at a point where pressing the button won't use the seed, but it will open the chest.
Right.
Something like that.
This is like kind of related, but sort of not really. But I always really loved the ring menu system from Secret of Mana and a couple of the sequel games there, where it's like, if you want to change your weapon, you sort of bring up this circular menu with icons of what your other weapons are, and then you kind of
it's like a flat circle that you're looking at.
Yeah, and then you can sort of spin the circle with the D-pad and select whatever it is. And like I'm not saying that like they should put that in the Legend of Zelda. I just wanted to say I really love that.
Yeah,
because
I don't think it'd be wrong.
The reason I love it is like it keeps the act of navigating a menu just fun on its own. And like, to be fair, it's not fun really to equip and unequip items in this game, because like you have to hit the start button, and then you hear that noise and it's like fades to white, and there's always that bit of latency between, and then you have to get back into the action and everything. But you know, I mean, as opposed to something like Secret of Mana, where every time I wanted to change to a different weapon or use an item or like cast a spell, it was like purely fun, like visually, and in terms of like the kind of feedback you got navigating this menu was awesome. And I think that like in games like this where there's a lot of items and it's basically a lock and key scenario, like this item unlocks this challenge, or this item fixes this or does this, it's like you're going to be changing around items so much, especially with a 2-button controller. And so like as you know, I always appreciate it when games kind of do as much as they can to make that menu like satisfying.
Especially because if you want to be an optimal fighter in that game, in the Oracle of Seasons, you want to be carrying around your boomerang if you want to be disposing of enemies in an efficient way. So if not only do I have to switch off every time I have to use a utility item, and if I want to be a good fighter, I have to switch back to boomerang, walk around, find the stump, switch to the rod, jump on the stump, change the seasons, back to
Actually, boomerang. I was going to say, you know, and I love this game, and I love changing the seasons, and I love all of that. But I wished, and I mean, now, of course, it's kind of like what you said earlier, Dan, where it's like we're looking at it now, and we're applying what we think about design now. And in some ways, maybe that's not super fair. But when you jump up onto the stump, it's like, how come I can't just jump up onto the stump and automatically hit
because
any
that's
button,
the only thing the rod does.
Hit any button and then use the rod. Because the rod effectively does nothing else in the game. You can use it to bat enemies, but like you don't do damage to them, but you can knock them back, and that's actually pretty fun. Because if there are like holes around that they can fall through, sometimes I just enjoy the feeling of like, I hit you with this useless item and then you fell down the hole.
Those little wobbly guys in the first dungeon where the only way to kill them is to knock them into a hole.
It's like a style thing. If a game can have you have your own play style, maybe you just like doing that.
Well, I always liked doing it because it's that feeling of like, you know, I got you, you idiot. This isn't even a sword. It's just, it's like, it's a rod. It doesn't even do damage, and like gotcha. But like when you are going onto the tree stump to change seasons with the Rod of Seasons, I wish you could just walk up to it, do that cool front flip animation that he does, which looks awesome. Land on the stump, and then whatever button you press, you just use the rod. Because otherwise, it's like, you got to go into the menu and you got to select the Rod of Seasons.
I don't think you can even jump on the stump unless you have the rod equipped, right?
Oh, is that so?
I think so. I could be wrong.
I didn't try, honestly, beforehand.
I had a thing about the items. I was wondering if this was on my mind, and you were talking about how it was annoying to waste the ember seeds. There didn't seem any good reason, and this actually could be applied to later Zeldas, there didn't seem like any good reason to make the bombs or the seeds consumable. Why do they have to deplete? The game is so set on making sure you have enough at all times because
they give you a lot. They give you like 20.
They make sure of it. They make sure that you start cutting the grass, you're going to get all your items back. I couldn't tell, but it seemed like maybe it even gave me items based on what I was missing. That's what some...
I guess I can see that the bombs being finite because maybe it's OP if you just have lots of bombs. I don't know, but...
But they, like, for the boss fight with the floating face, that of course you need to bomb the floating face. They had to also have the spiders drop bombs, which actually in that battle was the hint that led me to use them in the first place, to be fair.
Do you know what? But you know, far be it for me to tell anyone what to do. But I think if I was in charge of designing that scenario, what I would do is I would have the boss instead of dropping spiders from the ceiling, I would drop live bombs
Yeah.
that
If
you
one
that
accidentally
you
hits
could
his
that
face.
you could pick up
Yeah.
and throw.
Yeah.
And then if I was designing that scenario and they said, okay, there's this boss, and the only way to hurt it is with bombs, I would skip this whole spider thing and just drop live bombs.
I think we go right back to the drawing board, because why is a floating face unaffected by a sword but can be affected by a bomb? Like,
Or if the spiders carry a bomb.
like, why are we fighting the floating face?
Or it'd be really neat if there was a spidery insect type design with a bomb on its back, that when you killed it with the sword, it would drop a bomb, right? That would be, that'd be fun.
Yeah.
I mean, like Dan, you said, like you would go back to the drawing board.
Well, like, let's go back to the drawing board. It's called the lair of snakes or whatever. How about the boss is a fucking snake?
Yeah, snakes
like,
remain.
And it's like it goes around gobbling anything in its way, and you drop a bomb and then it eats the bomb.
That'd be neat.
Great, right?
That'd be neat. Although, to be fair, maybe they were trying to avoid the 2D Zelda thing that's really common, where it's like, put a bomb in this thing's mouth.
But I don't think it was common at that point.
No,
and also,
I guess not. But
I really think they were limited in terms of the tech a lot. Like, I'm imagining right now, like, making a snake and having all the segments follow each other and stuff. Like,
oh, did you know? Actually, I might have. I should have mentioned this before, but I think these games originally started as remakes of the original game, which is so the boss in the Gnarled Root dungeon,
just a goofy dragon,
is that dragon thing. That's the dragon with the horn. That's one of the bosses from the Legend of Zelda on the NES. Yeah. And so maybe the face ghost thing might be the same, where they're like, well, we're reusing old bosses.
I was gonna bring up the goofy dragon as a kind of a silly boss, but then I realized that it was either an homage or supposed to be a direct port of the original.
I like the dragon. Like, he looks good.
But why is he in the Gnarled Root dungeon?
I don't know.
He should be in the Wyvern's Keep or something, you know?
I see what you're saying.
Is it all the other bosses in the rest of the game, are they kind of tied to the dungeon?
Not.
I'm guessing not, because
the whole
snakes
as far as I can recall, the whole issue that Dan seems to have sort of persists, where it's like, I guess it is interesting where it's like that the outside world is very like thematically tight, you know, with the seasonal changes. But then like the dungeons are these kind of things where sometimes you're like, I didn't know I had to do that, and I'm not sensing a theme here. Like, I'm not picking up. And it's hard because I don't want to say that's a bad thing, because like, again, in Breath of the Wild, it's like the fact that is not part of the design, the fact that Breath of the Wild is so open-ended is like the best thing about it. But I guess the problem is, like, if you go halfway between like, this is a prescriptive thematic experience, and then like, this is more kind of trial and error and experimentation, and it's like, if you only go halfway between those two like nodes, and maybe you don't do it with enough of a flourish in the execution, I think the player kind of feels like, it's not even that thing where the player's like, oh, I feel like an idiot. It's that thing where they're like, oh, come on. Like, which I get. I mean, that would be a problem. At the end of the day, though, like, you know, since this is the one that I suggested that we play, like, I will put up with a lot of shortcomings in a game like this.
And I'm sure I would have,
because
if I
it's so
played this
nice.
much as a kid, I would have totally put up with it.
Yeah. I mean,
and they wouldn't have even seemed like shortcomings at the time.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is, like, when I was playing this game for the first time, I was really into the artwork, like the official art that you can see in the manuals and things like that. And that, like, it brought like the vibe to like a more
real thing,
like a living place in my mind, where I'm like, because I mean, I still think the art is really excellent, like the instruction manual and promo art and everything.
I watched, I wish I could remember which YouTuber this was, but I watched a video, and it might not have even been the focus of the video, but it was called, I think, the telescope effect, where if the only context you have of like a character is just their 8-bit form, then that's fine. But if you can first see them in higher detail and then see them in their 8-bit form, then you kind of imagine them more vividly. So that's like what you're saying. If you first look at the beautiful art and then you play the game and realize, oh, that sprite represents that beautiful thing that I remember.
Yeah.
That's going to totally change the experience. And I think that I was thinking about Fire Emblem recently after playing Pyre, and they do that because the sprites are really, really low res and simple because there's a lot of them on the screen.
In Fire Emblem?
Game. Yeah. But you see the characters in high detail when they're talking, so you know who's who, and you think of them that way when you look at the little sprites.
This reminds me, I really wanted to talk about this, actually, which is I love the way that this game opens. Because if we're talking about like sprites at higher detail or lower detail or the official art, did you guys watch the introduction like before, like the automatic roll? So if you start the game and you don't press any buttons, you see like the
Link's riding a horse.
Yeah, he's riding a horse, and like that is so fucking good. Like to me, like I'm in love with that whole sequence where it's like he's riding a horse. And I mean, there are like 4 different art styles that they seem to be using for that introduction. It's like you see Link from a distance and he seems to be drawn with this one particular art style. And then you see a close up of him and the animation's more limited and he's got a black outline now or whatever. But like that whole thing for me is like great. And again, like, I guess it set the tone for me and it set like this expectation for me. And it's really well drawn. And like at the end of that sequence where you pan up into the sky and it's like a really super blue sky with these like really rich looking textured clouds. And then you pan up and you stop panning and then the actual logo comes in for Oracle of Seasons and the music comes in. Like that's like so good. And like, if you're like me, then that's like something you'll get really into. And then when you're actually playing the game and like you're meeting the Oracle of Seasons and it goes into those bits of illustration where it's like you and the Oracle Din are dancing. And it's just like one drawing that I think they pan across this drawing. And it's like, Link is looking like a goof, like dancing like, and Din looks really cool. And like, but that art is like so good. And for me, prior to playing this game where you are this tiny little sprite of Link, it's like they give you the intro and you see this like really nice art of him. And then you meet the Oracle and you get a context for it. Kind of like what you said earlier, Dan, where it's like, what he looks like and now he's a little dude. And I just think like it just really brings it alive for me. And I mean, that's why I like this game.
It lets you still use your imagination in now even thinking of what else is going on in that higher res kind of the cutscene kind of thing.
Yeah. I like that and I value that a lot in video games, that the idea of having a little bit of imagination for yourself. It's that sort of vibe of like the game is here and it's giving you something, but it's presenting it in a context where you have enough of a creative license to see deeper into this experience. And it's like a mirror and it's showing you kind of like your take on it. And I mean, I mentioned Secret of Mana before when I talked about the ring menu system. Yeah. But I watched a playthrough of Secret of Mana recently by the Super Beard Bros on YouTube. They did like a playthrough with Pro Jared, and like it's a really good playthrough. I think it's like really entertaining. But I watched them kind of like blitz through this game really quickly, and because when I was a child, I played Secret of Mana. It took me quite a while. Yeah, and I just watched them blitz through it, and like I'm an adult now, and when I like saw all this dialogue that the characters were saying and the scenes and the drama, and I was like, oh my god, like I don't remember it this way. When I was a child, I remember like I was absorbed in the atmosphere of this video game. I extrapolated my own kind of drama that I applied to it, that I think like the graphics and the music and the atmosphere of the whole experience was like suggesting to me things that were not really explicitly there, but that I kind of convinced myself were there. And that's how I feel about a lot of, the games that I played when I was younger. I feel that way now. I feel like it's a shame, actually, because I feel like my imagination is weaker. And yeah. And I mean, now I definitely know how it would have felt, I guess, to be my dad and to watch me when I'm like, 10 playing a Super Nintendo game. And just for, because from an adult perspective, you're kind of like, what the fuck is going on? Like, this is, how can you sit here and play this for hours?
My parents said comments like that.
Yeah.
But it was more when they were more baffled by like multiplayer games where like they were always seeing me doing the same things, like Super Smash Bros. Like it looks, every time you look, it's like kind of the same thing going on.
See, my dad was like the opposite, because my dad played multiplayer games.
Oh, okay.
Like he played like Descent 3, and then later he played like Half-Life, like Deathmatch for Half-Life 2 and everything.
Oh, yeah.
But then sometimes I was like, Dad, you play video games? And he's like, yeah. And then I'm like, Dad, I have this like finely crafted narrative RPG experience for you to enjoy. It's called, whatever. And he'd just be like, I don't have any fucking time for that. Like, which I get now. And I mean, earlier, like we said, it's kind of like if you play a game now, it was why we're doing this whole thing. Because like if you play a game now, it's like it's going to be Overwatch, or it's going to be like an online card game, or it's going to be a fighting game or something that you get done quickly. And like
with games that are, because nowadays we can push the boundaries of the tech and the hardware and graphics and resources, that things get really realistic. And what you lose from that is sort of the areas that your imagination does fill in. It like fills in everything already for you.
Yeah.
So there's something really nice about that I can even still appreciate from playing older games like this.
Yeah, you lose part of that. I mean, now we have had for a long time, like the computing power and the resources, and there is something lost. And I'm not advocating for like vague design, and I'm not saying like detail is bad, and I'm not saying like detailed art is bad, because it's actually pretty good. It's just like there's more than one way to convey an experience, I guess. If it comes to something like, I really like Metal Gear Solid 5, and that's a very graphically rich experience. But it works really well, because it's like the Metal Gear series kind of is a series about detail. It's and especially in 5, it's sort of like everything's important, like light and shadow. And if you knock an object over, it makes a noise, and you might not want to do that because you might alert someone to your presence. So in a game like that, it's like, give me as much detail as you can, because it's part of the experience. It's part of what makes it like cool. But in a lot of ways, like if you're adventuring through a world, it's like the less detail, almost, the better. Because it's kind of like when you are playing, this is the whole point of the silent protagonist and everything. When you are playing these 2D Zelda games and the 3D ones, if you're going to talk about your experience, you're not going to say Link did this and then he defeated the boss. You say, I did this. I defeated the boss. I traveled over here. I fought this. And that's great in an adventure game where it's like you should project yourself into the game. And the
even if the character speaks and has its own personality, I think if you're the one controlling it, you tend to say, I did it.
Yeah.
That's just what I've noticed from people talking about games.
I find like, I mean, everything is good. If it's done well, every kind of experience is good. But if I had to generalize, I would say like, I either like this one extreme of the spectrum, which is the silent protagonist says nothing and then you project your mind into it. Especially for maybe a game like Pokemon, where you're like, this is my journey, this is my team of Pokemon, I chose to do this. And then I like the extreme other side of it, which is, again, in RPGs, I generated the character, I chose the details about what they look like, I choose all the dialogue options, and I craft a kind of specific like role for myself. So like, there are good examples in the middle where it's like the developers made this story and you're playing a very clear-cut character.
Mm-hmm.
There are good examples of that, but I typically enjoy either one extreme or the other.
Yeah.
It's like no detail or as much detail, but it's all up to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think because both of those options let you in to the experience.
Yeah.
Which is fun, you know. So Adrian, what did you think of the sound and the music?
Two things that stuck out to me. I was surprised that even though it was resource limited, they could do things like the first time you meet Din, they have the music sort of fade in depending on how close to you are to that room.
Oh yeah.
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 So that was a little thing, and it wasn't a mind-blowing, amazing kind of detail, but it was a detail nonetheless. And just the fact that they could do that with the hardware and resources, that was cool. And something I particularly like in sound design is sound effects that aren't necessarily realistic, but they use more like tonal kind of things that are satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get a rupee or kind of open a chest, picking up items kind of thing, it has a tonal sort of bleep or bloop to it, or a flourish, and that's something that's very characteristic of a lot of older games, I think. Yeah.
One thing I really like is when you go into the menu, like when you to like change out your weapon or whatever music is playing is put into a kind of faded out, like subtler, quieter version of itself. So like if you're in the village,
it's not just the volume lower.
Yeah, it's not just the volume. Okay. It's like it's a characteristic. Like if you're in the village or out in the world or wherever, you go into the menu, the same song is playing, but the instrumentation changes, and like they sustain the notes for a shorter amount of time. So like if it's like, if you're out in the world and it's like da 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 da. Actually, that's Link's Awakening. But and then you're in the menu, it goes like ding din 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 din,
okay,
which is cool. Great. Like and again, you know, Adrian said it's like it's a detail. It's not mind blowing, but all of this, it's like all this care and skill and thought is going into it, and it pays off, and it's part of the charm. Yeah. I really like the music and the sound in this game too. And I think it's interesting, Adrian, how you said like it's like sometimes it's not like, so to speak, totally accurate sounds, but it's like a mood is being conveyed through these sound effects.
Yeah. Totally accurate sounds weren't even possible, right?
No, not really.
Not even close.
You could get good crunchy sounds out of the Game Boy Color, like kind of.
But more like audio files are big and they're trying to fit it in the cartridge.
It's like the thing that's good about high quality experiences like this is that the resources are limited. So you feel like almost every asset that's in there is very well made. It's like there's like one sound for when you do damage to a boss or a mini boss, and it's that like brrr kind of noise, right?
Yeah.
But it's a great noise, and like it's satisfying. It's fun to hear on its own, and like sure, every boss and mini boss is making the same noise, but it's just like you can tell a lot of care and skill went into like the construction of that one noise.
Yeah.
So to hear it again and again is fine. You know,
that makes it memorable too.
Yeah,
like,
it's
if you grew up playing this, you probably still, if you heard the sound, you could recognize.
Yeah.
You know, the sound.
Yeah, and like so much of the sound is just so endearing as well in this game. Like there's the kangaroo Ricky.
I didn't get that
far.
Neither
of us got far enough to meet Ricky, but
I
would keep playing just for that.
It is good. Like I don't like, you know, if you're frustrated with some parts of this experience in terms of design and mechanics, and like obviously I'm not going to pressure you to play it, but like when you meet Ricky, it's like he makes these noises.
Yeah.
And you I guess Ricky's female because it's a kangaroo with a pouch, right?
But his
So-
name is Ricky.
Well, it's 2017. Female kangaroos can be named
Could
Ricky.
be a.
I've heard of females named Ricky, but not like Ricky. We're here looking at this Legend of Zelda. What's the title of it?
It's the Hyrule Historia, I think.
Yeah, it's
And there's a picture of Link and Ricky, and it's spelled Ricky, which is only a short form for Richard.
Hey, look,
And I just don't think there's very females named Richard.
Ricky's doing their own thing. More power. More
Maybe
power to
there's a
Ricky.
backstory, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a
We just
convoluted
don't know.
backstory. Actually,
There's a
It's
name
part of
switch
the,
at birth, I don't know.
sorry, sorry. I just remembered how complicated the official explanation for the Zelda timeline is. Anyway, but Ricky's great. Ricky makes these noises. It looks great, with the little sprites you're riding in the pouch, and you are controlling Ricky, but there's a unique control scheme, and there's this mechanic with, punching, and you can actually wind up your fist, and when you punch, you release a hurricane thing that goes and travels forward. But just at random, Ricky will make these kind of noises.
Reminds me of some of the
And it's
Pokemon
great.
sounds.
Yeah,
Like a lot
actually,
of, when you first see them, like a Pidgey or something.
Yeah.
They made similar sounds.
I mean, we've talked about Pokemon a fair bit, but it's unavoidable. It's the Game Boy.
Mhm.
But the sounds in Pokemon are really brilliant, and especially Blue and Red, the amount of trickery that they use to fit all that information into a cartridge
Mhm.
is really astounding.
I
There's so
wonder-
many programming shortcuts that they took, and with the sounds too. Some of the Pokemon in Blue and Red version, they share the same sound, but they change it and they shift the pitch, or they make certain parts of it longer or whatever, and it just feels like a new sound. So again, it's this thing where
Those sounds were very distinctive.
they're they're
Quite unique.
distinctive.
Yeah.
They're sort of satisfying sounds,
Yeah.
and I don't know.
I never
It's
thought
this,
about how much that brought me into that game, but I bet it did.
yeah. Well, a lot of these things are it's bridging the gap for you, because we talked about low fidelity and high fidelity graphic representations of characters. As soon as you're adding sound, and it's good sound, it's it's an entirely new dimension to interface with this thing. Or on the other hand, you could turn all the volume off and just listen to your heavy metal albums if you want instead, which people do, and if that's what people like to do, that's fine, I guess. I like to do that with Baldur's Gate.
Yeah.
I'll just turn the music off and just blast heavy metal.
I had a whole playlist for when I was playing Divine Divinity,
Yeah.
and it was Wonder Boy by Tenacious D,
Oh, yeah.
Immigrant Song.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good one. Yeah. I don't know. I'm always impressed by the Game Boy.
Mhm.
I mean, there's a lot of crap on the Game Boy. There's a lot of crap on every system. There's a lot of
Yeah, whatever.
there's garbage everywhere, right? But it's when these big productions succeed in what they're trying to do, it's just so impressive to me.
Mhm.
Yeah. And when the smaller productions succeed too, because Pokemon was a smaller production at first, it was mostly just crafted out of this really sincere drive and passion to get it done, which is why it's so good, I think. You guys didn't play Ages, right?
I almost did
Yeah.
by accident, because I
But I
forgot
was-
we were talking about seasons.
Yeah, I was just gonna say which oracle's your favorite? You've got Din, the dancer, and you got Nehru. She's a singer with a harp. This is a judge of character.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna judge you
Oh,
guys
yeah,
based
yeah.
on which
Did we meet
oracle.
Nehru?
No, she's
Okay.
it's not in
Oh,
this
I
game.
see.
Okay, so I don't know how I could make a judgment.
I liked Din
Yeah,
from the first impression.
yeah,
Yeah.
she's a nice girl. I did play Ages, and I was always sort of I just there were these. It's a personality thing, because in the introduction to seasons, it's Din is come dance with me, and then for me, I just be okay. But when you meet Nehru in Oracle of Ages, she's all right, you can just sit there and chill out, and I'm going to play the harp and sing. And I'd be that's nice. I can just, you do your thing, and I'll stand here. I'll listen, sure. Yeah. If you are interested, though, Ages is pretty cool.
Do they have the same dungeons?
No,
Okay.
no, different dungeons. Ages is neat. It's I think I prefer it to Seasons, but it's hard for me to justify why I prefer it. You know, the two games are so similar in their vibe. Yeah, I think it's just because anything to do with like time travel is pretty neat. You know, and time travel, I guess, is a very Legend of Zelda idea as well, which is cool. All right, I think that about covers it. Would you guys say like that you enjoyed it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say so.
And I think I'll keep playing it, actually.
Oh, great. Yeah. If you keep playing it, Adrian, I'll be. It'll be good actually, because I'll be like, if you're working on like the music or the sound for Wotan, I'll be like, you know that in Oracle of Seasons, this part where this, that'll be good. Yeah, you should do it. Yes, it's your homework. Keep it up. I mean, I enjoyed it a lot. I loved having an excuse to dedicate serious time to it again. Yeah. Would you recommend it to anyone else?
I wouldn't tell them to. I don't know. I wouldn't say like, oh, look at this novel experience that you haven't had before. Like,
right.
I would say if you're interested in Legend of Zelda and you want to see one of the earlier entries in this series, go play it.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I usually tend to recommend things that I feel are like pushing the boundaries today.
Yeah.
Like I don't usually say, "Oh, go back and try that." Like,
yeah. So Daniel here made Pony Island, which if you haven't played it, it pushes a couple boundaries here and there, just a little bit. If you have played it, you'll know what I'm talking about. But that's more like what you would. Yeah,
I'm always looking for something like that, or something that I think has exceptional quality by today's standards. Like I was talking about Pyre to you guys, which I think is just the quality. Yeah, the quality of like the animation and sound is just so exceptional that it's not groundbreakingly original. It is in a lot of ways, but that's not why I'm recommending it. Yeah.
Okay. Would you recommend it to anyone?
I think the reason why I like to go back to it is because when I played older games as a kid, I didn't have a sense of game design or what's good and what I actually did like. I kind of just played it and couldn't really explain why I liked it, but I think now if I go back to playing older games like this, I can sort of see things in that what I would like about it. I really liked Link to the Past, and I'd rather replay this, or I'd rather play this than that, just because I've already played that so much as a kid. I guess I'll let you know once I play more of this.
Yeah.
Now you know how to beat the ghost face.
The ghost.
Save yourself.
Don't pick up a spider.
Yeah.
The ghost face killer. So I feel that way too, actually, Adrian. I feel sort of like, I don't really like thinking about game design much when I'm not working on Wotan. It's like I really don't want to think about it, and I feel like a lot of these games for me, where the atmosphere or the level of quality is just so high, it kind of helps me to sort of calm down and stop putting my analytical hat on every time I pick something up. And like if the atmosphere is nice enough, or if the art is nice enough, or if the music is nice enough, especially the music, if it's like a good bit of like looping music, it's like really pleasant to listen to or whatever, it's just like, it just helps me so much to just like chill out and actually play a game for a change.
Yeah.
You know, rather than like dissecting every experience that I have with these things, where it's like, you know, how can I apply my thoughts to this and maybe learn something? And it's kind of like once you learn a little bit about like film theory, and then you're watching movies, and you're kind of like putting on like your story writing hat or whatever, and you're just like not having as much fun.
Yeah.
But anything like this gives me back that sense of fun, which is, why I wanted to recommend it. Yeah. All right, guys. I think that's it. Thank you for listening, everybody. If you're still with us. We'll be back again soon.
And next time, I'm recommending a game.
Yeah.
Oh.
Next time, it's Dan's turn to recommend something. And this time, it's personal. Because it's a personal recommendation of his. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys. That's it. Oh, maybe next episode we'll have a name for our podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the show, everybody.
Until next time.
Tune in next week to find out who lives and who dies.